to wait a second. It'll be like the Wizard of Oz now. It'll be like booming voice coming through now. Yes, here we go. Thank you. So, yes, anyway, my name is Josh O'Connor. I'm Senior Accessibility Consultant with the National Council for the Blind of Ireland's Centre for Inclusive Technology. What that means is that I spend a lot of my time doing things like accessibility audits, user testing of web applications with people with disabilities. I'm also involved with a reasonable amount of FP7 EU-funded research into various different things, which is all very interesting. And I've been working with people with disabilities directly for nearly 10 years. I'm a web developer and a graphic designer, and through one of life's curveballs, I was basically made redundant and needed a job pretty fast to pay my mortgage, and I ended up working with people with disabilities, teaching them how to use Word and programs like that. And that was my introduction into assistive technology and the empowering impact technologies in the web have had on the lives of people with disabilities. A bit of an errata first before I go any further is that it's kind of labelled as DDA compliance and W3C for some bizarre reason. I'm not going to be probably talking about either, really. So fly now if you're not, if that's egregious. I mean, if it is something that you do want to talk about, I will talk about it and tell you what I know about, how you could, use Joomla or other tools even. I'm not wedded to Joomla, even though I always hoped Joomla and Drupal would have a baby. Don't know what you call it really. Joomla, yeah. So, okay, so it's going to be very, very informal, and I want to hear what you guys think, and please feel free to ask me any questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. Only the ones you don't ask generally. So yes, so that's what I do. As Brian mentioned, I do a bit of writing, and I've written a few bits and pieces, and I'm very fortunate. I really enjoy what I do. I really like what I do. I feel, I hate the sell, buy world and all that stuff. So I feel really glad that, or my ego likes the notion of doing something worthwhile without being too worthy or anything horrible like that. So anyhow, please feel free to ask questions. I will kick on. Okay, so the key to the web is its universality. This is kicked off a lot. You'll hear this term an awful lot. But it's true, and it's important to remind ourselves of that because it's possible. It's actually technically possible. Those of you who remember the $6 million man and all of that, we have the technology. We do actually have the technology, but it's about application. It's about how it's used. So, how do you make this happen? How do you make it reality? There's an awful lot of talk about things like universal design, e-inclusion, the information society, the knowledge society being inclusive of all people, regardless of ability. That sounds like really lofty. Like how are you going to do that? You want to get people come in and click on your websites, but what about people who don't click, point and all of this kind of thing? How do you accommodate diverse user groups? How do you accommodate people who can't see? How do you accommodate people who can't move? How do you accommodate people who navigate the web using breath devices, breath-enabled devices? These things are real. So how do we make it happen? As I say, the use of technology is key. The proper use of technology is key. And particularly with accessibility, a lot of the stuff that's good for accessibility is just good design. It's a bit of a no-brainer. It's actually true. I view web development as a bit of a craft, and I think a bit of that would be good in our domain of work. So open source stuff is great. Something that always struck me, particularly about content management systems, is just how totally shite some of them were, particularly ones which were hawked by major corporations. I mean, that's just to be frank about it. They were pretty brutal. I mean, I was just talking with Brian earlier. I did some testing a few years ago on different content management systems, and I looked at commercial ones, bespoke ones, off-the-shelf ones, free open source ones, and the open source ones generally won hands down, just in terms of ease of use, functionality. My particular interest as well was not just what the content management system would output, but also its back end. How accessible is it to people who use assistive technology, devices like screen readers and that kind of thing, which we can talk about a little bit later. Who here knows what a screen reader is? Okay, great. Very few people do, so it's great. We can talk about that a little bit later on. It's not all love and peace and all the rest of it, though. There is a commercial imperative. In a way, some people would say, oh, this Joomla event's been hosted by Microsoft. You know, everyone's got horns and the things. I think it's kind of good in a way that these tools are being, getting a lot of visibility by larger corporations and all that kind of stuff. And in a sense, because it's about popularity. Everyone loves to love the band that's punk rock and goes, yeah, they were great, and I remember them when they were only playing in this shitty club and blah, blah. But actually, good news gets around, so there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with tools being used and incorporated into the mainstream, particularly when it comes to things like accessible tools and accessible development. I think that kind of stuff is actually really, really important, because accessibility has been traditionally seen as a niche thing, and it really kind of shouldn't be. What about accessibility? Accessibility for me, anyway, there's lots of different definitions, but accessibility for me is about making the web work for people with disabilities. That's really it. There's ancillary benefits like search engine optimization improvements. There's a very, very tight mapping, for example, between accessibility and the mobile web. So a lot of the stuff that you do for mobile web devices is really, really good for accessibility as well. We could talk about that. If anyone's interested, just holler. Joomla is a great content management system. I really, really like it. I think it's really simple. I think it's a very clear, user-friendly interface for sighted people. When I did my testing, it was one of the most accessible ones out of the box in terms of being able to be administrated by a blind user. So a blind user could actually log into the Joomla backend and create a site using it. And that was a big thumbs up at the time. That was a big thumbs up at the time because, as I say, some of the bigger off-the-shelf commercial ones, you couldn't do that. And that was just because form labels weren't labeled correctly. Text input boxes weren't labeled correctly. There was no semantics behind the scenes. It may have looked okay and had some usability and some scripting events being triggered, but it didn't work. But it looked okay. So, when you go under the hood, I'm a nerd, so I go under the hood and I like to figure how things work. You find out that bit of emperor's new clothes with a lot of things. But Joomla was great, really good. Having said that, it still has a long way to go, I think. Drupal's better. I just thought I'd get it out there. I'd get it out of the way. In terms of accessibility, Drupal's better. The back end is far more accessible. I'm not a total fan of Drupal because I think it's a little bit complicated and it's a little bit overkill for many, many users who just don't care about extending the core or doing all that stuff. They just want to build things. So what I really liked about Joomla was that it's relatively simple. The user interface is simple. Conceptually, it's simple. I dropped the ball, to be honest, a little bit between. I'm still using 1.5, and it was really interesting to hear most people still using 1.5.
Go on,
yeah.
I'll pick them in a second.
Because and I have an inherent fear of change anyway, so I didn't even really want to go down the road. But in Phil's last talk, it was interesting to hear that things have changed in the new version. Migrating over mightn't be as hairy as you think, and things like dropping sections, that kind of stuff. That's great. It simplifies. If it simplifies the whole thing and makes it easier to use, that's brilliant. What were you going to say?
So I was just going to say, in 1.7, there are two different administrator templates. There's the default one, which is the one that you've all probably seen, but there's another one which has got a crazy name of Hathor.
Hathor, yeah. You're stealing my thunder now because I was going to get to that.
Sorry.
There you go. The drum roll.
Go on.
Yes, but yes, Brian's absolutely right. There is an accessible backend template, right? Developed by Andrea Tarr, and yes, it's a part of the core. As a part of 1.7, it was introduced in 1.6. Is it still in?
1.6.
And it's still there. Okay, brilliant. Well, that's really good to hear because I wasn't too sure if it was still there. That's a great thing. And earlier on, I may as well just get it out rather than trying to save it for a later slide. It's great to hear about bees. Is still in there. It's a great template, and it's a fantastic thing that you can hack and make accessible stuff with. And Angie Rucker did really good work on that as well. So yeah, thanks for that. I wasn't sure. No, you're fine. I wasn't sure if it was in 1.6 and then dropped.
No, it's there for future.
Yeah.
It's not the default one.
Yes.
But the basic difference, if you look at it, your first thought is going to be, everything's icons have gone from the top right to the top left, and the graphics don't look quite as nice. That's going to be your immediate thought. But where it really differs is both from a visual impairment point of view. The structure has got everything that it needs, absolutely everything that it needs in the right place.
Yeah.
For somebody who's visually impaired. Somebody who's using keyboard tabbing.
Yes.
Move around instead of a mouse.
Yes.
Everything's in. That's why it's got left to right rather than right to left. It means everything's in the right place.
Yeah.
And the screen readers, which we'll come on to, also can read everything in the correct order.
Well, that's brilliant, and those two things are really, really important for accessibility. One, the hands down the most simple thing you can do to make your stuff more accessible is increase the default font size and create a high color contrast widget so that the person can click on it and then swap out a style sheet, and then they'll have a black background with maybe slightly large white text with yellow underlined text for links. Right? If you do that one thing, there will be thousands of people with vision impairments who will be able to use your site much more easily, and they'll appreciate it. Very simple thing to do. I do user testing, so I work a lot with the government, work with public sector websites. We get people in to sit down, and then they log on to the revenue website or log on to some transport website, and they would have a vision impairment. They may be using screen magnification, they may not, and they may have their face like this stuck up against the screen or complaining because of glare. Glare is a huge issue. I mean, for someone with a vision impairment, this white space would be burning their really hurting them, so that's a real big problem. So color schemes that turn down the glare in a display are really, really useful and really, really helpful. So, you could spend thousands of pounds, right, doing a big user test with loads of vision impaired people, and at the end of it, the end result will be create a color contrast version, high color contrast version. So do it, and you'll be in a happy place, okay?
Sorry, could you just through how you did that thing again?
Which thing?
To create the simple high contrast.
Yeah, you can use CSS. You can create. There's a couple of different ways. One is a JavaScript style switcher, which unfortunately is scripting dependent. So if JavaScript is off, it won't work. So a PHP style switcher is another way. But they'd be the two kind of main ways: a JavaScripting style switcher or a PHP style switcher. I'd recommend the PHP style switcher, but whatever, JavaScript isn't really the dirty word in accessibility terms it used to be. Porn has a lot to answer for, but there are useful things that you can do with scripting. So I mean, as I say, right, if say this was a web page, you just swap this out to make the background black, make all of this text slightly larger, make it white, and any links, make them yellow, and then underline them when they focus. So if the user's tabbing through the elements on a page, and as you all probably know, the way keyboard access works is dependent on the source order in the code. So the way you order things within your source order, that determines the tab order. So doing that will mean that your stuff is more accessible. So, simple. Relatively accessible backend, yes, it did at the time, but to be perfectly frank, the competition was not great. So Joomla did win. Now, it was usable. It won in sense of it bet a lot of other ones. Drupal was better, so and still is, I think. But Joomla, as Brian was saying, there are aspects of let's say the Hathor template. Like if that stuff could be put into the core, as the default, the ARIA stuff, all that kind of thing, that would be brilliant.
Hathor was kind of an experiment.
Yeah.
Some of the lessons from the Hathor thing have moved across into the Bluestalk.
Great.
But it's still not 100%.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether it will ever will be. But
okay, no worries. But just if anyone was to ask me, well, what do you think you should do with the backend? Do what Andrea did.
Yeah.
Okay, and continue that. And, another thing, if there's one takeaway from this, accessibility is not orthogonal to good practice. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't get in the way, or it shouldn't be considered to be antithetical to good design or anything like that. The whole thing should just sit there as a layer, as a part of your good design and a part of your good practice, So you could take like an accessible and an inaccessible website. They could superficially look the same, but one underneath the hood could have loads of semantics, loads of good structured HTML, well marked up forms, good heading structure, nice error recovery, good form validation, all of that kind of stuff. And another one wouldn't, but they could essentially look the same, Okay, so if you can, yes, Joomla was able to combine CSS output with semantically well-formed HTML. So it was that separation of elements, and there was a lot of talks earlier about the model view, controller view, and it's a simple architecture for software, and it's a good practice for the web. So you separate out your HTML from your CSS and from your JavaScript, and they're three separate layers. okay? And think of them as three different things, and you deal with them in three separate files, and you don't mix them all together. But I mean, that's all a part of good design, web standards, good practice, right? That shouldn't be a newsflash for anyone who works on the web, really. Anyone shocked to hear that? No? No, I didn't think so. Okay. As we mentioned earlier with Hathor, color contrast in the back end with Hathor was really, really good. I mean, I was very, very impressed by Andrea's work. I thought it was great. Making the back end more accessible, combining the use of ARIA. We'll talk about ARIA a little bit, because it's a really, really interesting technology. And we'll also talk about HTML5, because it's wave of the future and all that kind of thing. And you can use a WYSIWYG editor that helps you author accessible content. Does such a beast even exist? Well, there are pretty good ones. You know, the X standard is a pretty good one. But in principle, the tools that you use should support you in the creation of accessible content. So what that means is that the tool should enable you as a designer to be able to do all the accessibility stuff without having to read like a thesis on accessibility or try and figure out, you know, all these different disability types or ways to serve new different interaction models and all that kind of stuff, because it can be complicated. But in the time that I've been working in this area, much of what I know now about accessibility is that it's actually quite straightforward. It seems, when you're on the outside, to be kind of nebulous and difficult and esoteric and all of that, but it's actually not. And it's also loaded with loads of things like, can I say to that blind person, I'll see you next week? Because I can't, because they're blind. Or I remember when I started, I was going through a real Stevie Wonder thing. I don't know why. When I started working with the National Council for the Blind, I was listening to Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, and I just, no real reason, just love Stevie Wonder, love Ray Charles. But I felt, I can't say I really like Stevie Wonder because they'll think I'm just trying to kind of ingratiate myself or something, you know. You know, they'll think he's a spy coming in from the cold or something, you know. So, you know, there's a lot of inky feelings around trying to, you know, do it. But all I'm saying is be direct, be straight, and do your best. And that's it, as much as anyone could reasonably ask of anyone. So, Andrea Tar's Hathor Accessible Admin template, there's a screenshot of it. And it's great. It actually looks like very much like a previous version of a website I developed for the National Council for the Blind. It was very, very similar colors. But the reason they were like that is because they were very good colors for people with vision impairment. Like that text could be a little bit larger, but then again, that can be resized within the browser. It's absolutely fine. But it's good, a good high color contrast system. And I suppose in a sense, you know, it makes sense that Joomla has it as an option. It doesn't have to be mandatory or anything like that, you know. Accessibility shouldn't be like a cudgel that, you know, you hit everyone over the head with. You know, sometimes people who are into accessibility are portrayed as kind of do-goody, whingy people. But, you know, we're not all like that. There are some good do-goody, whingy people. But everybody's like that. I have, you know, I was watching The West Wing and a while back, and there's a great line in it when Leo, I don't know if anyone watched The West Wing, Leo was one of my favorite characters, and he was walking along and he turns to Josh, the other Josh, he says, technology's failed. You know, technology, where's my jetpack? I just thought that was brilliant, you know, because now we're so used to kind of technology doing things for us, but still it mightn't really do what we need, you know. Think about that one, that's a good one. So, some of the actual improvements in 1.6, I mean, they're a list of some of the features that were in the actual template itself. So on all pages of the accessibility, sorry, A11Y is a numeronym for accessibility, by the way, because when you've been doing this for 10 years, here I am, you get very tired of typing the word accessibility, so it's just an abbreviation. So skip to content lists, links, they're very useful. They allow users to skip over content. If you develop a website that has structured HTML and that you've got headings and that kind of thing, there's no real need to have a skip to content link, because the whole idea is that you can allow a user to be able to jump over chunks of content. Right, and I'll tell you a little bit later when we talk a bit more about screen readers about how that works. Because, you know, your H1, H2, H3, those types, they're not just there just for the crack, as we say in Ireland, just for the fun of it. You know, they actually have a purpose. One of the reasons they're important for accessibility is because, I may as well talk about it now actually, what I think of it, is because screen reader users, a screen reader user, it's actually not the correct term. People say it's a screen reader. It's not really a screen reader. It's actually a screen navigating and reading device. You know, I mean, you said a common thing earlier. The screen reader can read it in the correct order. Actually, a screen reader user will be able to query every single HTML element on the page. I can bring up headings, I can bring up tables, I can bring up lists, I can bring up every link on the page. I can even extract all of those things by querying the API, put it into a dialog box, and then use my cursor keys to go up and down through them all really, really quickly. So a screen reader is not the correct term. It's a screen navigation and reading device. It's a text-to-speech software application that queries an accessibility API, mostly MSAA, which was the old API. Now UI automation is the new one, but there's also iAccessible 2, which has been implemented by Mozilla. And that's why Firefox has got a lot of support for accessibility features. So anyway, a screen reader user, just for example, say you have headings on a page, could press the H key and bounce through those headings and get to content and say, and then they'd hear the output, is that of interest to me? Yes, no, if not, continue. Yes, no, if not, continue. And the same with links, so on and so forth. So the mode of interaction is very, very different. A sighted person can look at something and very quickly get an overview. You very quickly know, oh, milliseconds, whether you're interested in the page content or not, or what sections relate to what. A non-sighted person has to use the tool in the way I described to bounce around and get a feel for what's on the page, you know. So that's why accessibility really, really ties very, very tightly into semantics, into the HTML, the structure of your content, and using the language properly. Every now and again you do have to bring hacks into the thing, but that's just the way it is. Okay. So it is appropriate structural headers. The colors pass the WCAG 2AA test. So what that means is that if you use a color contrast analyzer, which is a really useful tool, also developed by my friend Jez Lemon and Juicy Studio, you can actually select foreground and background colors, and what it does is it looks at the luminosity ratios between those colors and tells you if they're, you know, at a permissible level related to best knowledge or best practice about what a vision impairment is. The figures are actually a little bit arbitrary, they're not entirely 100%, but you can get a fairly good idea for, you know, what's working and what isn't. So for example, don't put like, you know, blue text on a blue background, or, you know, like that kind of thing. You know, you use your own common sense a lot of the time as to what's going to work, and you'll be quite probably right. So keyboard accessibility is really, really important because blind people don't use mouse. It's no use. So everything has to be accessible via the keyboard. So the accordion panels in the Hathor template can be opened via the keyboard. I think these were works in progress at the time when I was looking at this stuff. But has that been improved, Brian? Do you know?
I think so.
Yeah.
Looking through the list.
Yeah.
I'm not 100%. Definitely some of them I recognise from the change logs. So.
Right. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So some of those were just works in progress at that time.
I suspect probably they're all done.
Yeah. Great. So way area, roles and structural elements and segments. We may as well talk about way area. Way area stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, and it's a specification out from the w3c which acts as a bridging language. So why do you need a bridging language? You need a bridging language because HTML5 has taken years, absolute years, to get into what's called a steady state. So before that, if people are building very sophisticated Web 2.0 type applications, and they're developing widgets and using libraries, JavaScript libraries, toolkits that don't support accessibility, how do you make that stuff accessible? So a very common practice, for example, would be somebody working with a JavaScript library. They might define a widget, they'd style it using CSS, they'd add a whole load of JavaScript behaviors, but they might have no semantic components in it at all. It might look okay, and it might be very apparent to you as a sighted person what it does, whether it's a slider or whether it's some kind of date picker or color picker or whatever it is. but for a non-sighted person or person with disability, somebody who can't see the screen, whatever it is, there's no semantic component. So ARIA was a way of bridging the gap between where HTML4 was at and where HTML5 was hoping to be. So the specification actually is completely platform independent. You can use ARIA stuff on XML, you can use it on SVG documents, you can use it on not just HTML. What it does is it's a way of describing the role of a widget, a state of a particular component. So for example, you could have a checkbox being checked or partially checked or not checked, like that. Or you could say this is a tree grid. This control is a tree grid, or it's, it has a particular property. So ARIA was a way of doing that, and it's actually gained some traction. It's quite well supported in many browsers now. It's quite well supported. Some parts of it are quite well supported, such as there's now landmark roles in, which are now supported by VoiceOver, which is the screen reader that comes bundled with iOS 4, or Mac OS, sorry, and iOS 4. So again, HTML5 is coming on stream, and HTML5 is a game changer in many, many ways. But in the meantime, I do actually suggest if you're going to build HTML5 stuff that you kind of add ARIA stuff to your HTML5 stuff for backwards compatibility. So really it's very simple. I mean, it's often just a text string, literally like role equals banner or role equals navigation. HTML5 has similar elements like that, so there is some crossover between the two. Sometimes a bit of a conflict about what should trump what. And I think the general consensus is that ARIA should trump HTML5 actually. So anyhow, any questions as well, please just holler. I hope I made myself clear about these things, and I sometimes I can talk a little bit quickly, but yeah, these slides will be available, and I'll tag some links on these so you can have a look and then get links to the ARIA specification or to some best practices, where you can look at things like the Opera developer curriculum. Those kind of things are really good resources. Okay. Labels and form fields, good practice, titles and form fields for tabular data. Removal of jump menus, removal of tables are only for layout. Actually, tables used for layout is a little bit of a kind of a, it's not an accessibility no-no, to be honest. I mean, don't use your tables for layout or your head will explode. No, it's not really like that. They're an annoyance, I guess, when there's lots of them, if you've lots of nested tables. But really, if you've got, structured content, good HTML embedded in there, it's okay, because a screen reader user can bounce around using headings and other controls like that. So it's not a total showstopper. The problem is, to some degree, if there's lots of layout tables, if you think of the document object model as a tree, and each of the elements in your HTML page are like nodes on that tree, if you're using assistive technology, you can hook in on each of those nodes, even if you mightn't see the table for layout. So a screen reader will see them. Okay, well this is all old hat now, because we've seen B's template. It's a part of the core, which I didn't actually know until today, so yay, coming here. I think it's great. It's a fantastic, it's just a good practice design. What can you do? So this will save you buying my book. Some say I have destructive impulses, but there you go. Roll your own accessible templates, and there's been plenty of talk today about how to do that. There was a really good presentation earlier about how to make your own template, and there was talk about accessibility. Using semantically correct HTML, CSS is important. Headings to communicate structure, suitable color scheme, ensure good color contrast, and create a high color contrast style switcher if possible. Really simple stuff, but has a really good impact. Markup lists, data tables, form controls correctly. Using alternate text. Alternate text is probably like a poster child for accessibility. And one simple thing you can do is, don't be too uptight about describing every image. A blind user won't feel slighted if you haven't described every single equivalent of a spacer GIF in your attempt. There's no need to go nuts describing everything. Your best friend can be alt equals quote quote, which is a null alt value, which will just take It doesn't remove it entirely from the DOM, but what it does is it flags the assistive technology to skip an image that's purely decorative. So that's a very useful thing. If an image has a particular function, describe the function and not the image. Because try and remember that. Yes, if you use an image as a button, say alt equals button. Don't say alt equals curvy box with blue gradient and word, like that. Only when you think about it, do you actually go, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. So think of function rather than form with things like this.
Sorry, excuse me, so you're saying about graphics, you're describing the outside what's in the graphic, not what it looks like?
No, what I'm saying is that you can describe what's in the image or what it looks like as you need to. No problem at all. Just be as verbose as you like, right? When it's relevant or when it's pertinent. But if a graphic is used and it has some function, so it's used as a button, or it's used as an email icon which triggers a script which opens up an email client, or download a PDF or something like that. Put in that word. Alt equals quote download PDF, or alt equals activate email client, that kind of stuff. So you're describing a function to a person who can't see the screen, right? So think of it a little bit like that, So it's safe enough to say that all of these things have a real impact on the user experience. It's not actually a vague, nebulous, oh, well, yes, doing this will keep all the people with disabilities happy, and they won't all storm the Houses of Parliament in their wheelchairs and throw themselves into the Thames or whatever it is, right? So, yes. Another very, very simple thing you can do is use descriptive link text. Really simple thing. You've got read more or click here links. You see that a lot. What actually happens for a user of assistive technology, when you give those items focus, what's announced is link, click here, link, click here, or link, read more. Read more what? Click what? What are you going to, A sighted person will look at a page and get the gestalt view of the page. You'll get an overview of what the page is, what the relationship between different content is. A non-sighted person has to actually go through all the elements on the page, maybe not all, but certainly the lion's share of them, to find out what the website's all about, that kind of thing. So using descriptive link text, it's a total no-brainer. You don't need to even know code. Joomla allows you to do that really, really easily. You just put descriptive keywords inside your link text and include it within the actual href, and then that's it. More accessible content. Another simple thing you can do is include the document type and size in an URL for a downloadable document. So, for example, that says PDF. 1.1 megabytes. So that could be MS Word or whatever it is you're using. So what happens is, say for example, this string here was a link. Include that in the link. So what'll happen is, when it's given focus, the link would say, find out more about how to include the document type and size in an URL for a downloadable doc PDF. So the user will know the function of the document, its purpose, what the actual document format is, and its size. So, for example, if you're on a limited capacity bandwidth connection and there's a 23 megabit PDF about to download, you'd like to know that. So, right.
Common sense for everybody.
Oh, completely, exactly. So all of the stuff that's good here that I'm describing is going to up your game, absolutely, for everyone. And that's it. Accessibility isn't a niche thing. It shouldn't be just a niche thing. There's ancillary benefits. So again, yes, using null alt values for purely decorative images is really good. It takes them away from it doesn't take them away, but what it does is it tells the assistive technology not to give this any attention. It's still there, but it just tells it not to. Use the validator, but remember that validation is not equivalent to accessibility. A lot of people think that, and there was a particular fashion, I suppose, a few years ago to be able to appease a validator, particularly for people who didn't know about accessibility. and it's easy to say I work in this area, but I mean, for many people, they thought that the validator was a flag for accessibility. Okay, you get your green tick, brilliant, I'm sorted. But it's not the case at all. So, I mean, it generally, all a validator means is that you're actually conforming to a particular grammar. Your grammar of your document is conforming to a particular structure and a particular set of rules. So that's what the doc type is within your web page. The doc type says to the browser, this document is a particular type of document, and then the validator checks the rules that are defined within that document and then states if it's conformant or not. That's it. It does not mean it's accessible, does not mean it's a better web page, and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, that idea that it did gain some traction, and that was a kind of a problem. But for my money, I wouldn't mind if it did. It would be great if you could rely on these automated tests, and at the end of it, accessible web page. Brilliant. But there's plenty of things like unencoded ampersands, things that are completely irrelevant, that a validator would flag as a warning, and your manager would come along and say, the validator says, you've got to do this, right? And then it doesn't matter, pretty much. Someone's going to lose sleep about an unencoded ampersand. I hope not. Okay, some useful tools. The Wave toolbar from webaim.org. Webaim.org, totally excellent website. Highly recommend it. I have stolen from it royally over the years. And I highly recommend that you all look at it and read it and learn from it. It's brilliant, and that's a great tool as well. I think it's one of my fave tools for validation, for accessibility testing. Because you just literally put the URL in, click a thing on the browser, there's a red little box, go wave this page, and then you get these really nice little notices, shall we say, in line about the status of the page from an accessibility perspective. So it's really, really useful, totally free, and the WebAIM crowd are a great bunch of guys and gals. Another excellent website is Juicy Studio, my friend Jez Lemon. And it's a great website. Jez has kind of dropped off the radar a little bit in terms of his writing. It's just because he's working like a maniac on other things. But for many years, he was a real stalwart of accessible web development and was the go-to guy for the real deep, nerdy shit. Like, your brain starts to go, about how do I script this, or what's this doc type conformant to this? And Jez would always know what the answer was. So, and still does. So free stuff that you can use. NVDA is a brilliant screen reader. I'll talk a little bit about testing with screen readers, actually. How much time have I got? Probably not very much. Okay. We'll keep going until someone throws us out. This is a great free screen reader. It's a really good system. Orca, just because we're all open source and all the rest of it here, it's a part of the GNOME project. Problem is I don't know anyone really who uses it. Perfectly honest with you. I know a few who use that one, but just for fun. Kind of thing. Or to test, or to say, yes, it's via this API I can detect this using this screen reader.
Someone told me that me as a sighted person,
yes,
is absolutely completely the wrong person to even not wasting my time using a screen reader.
Yes.
Test, because I'm never going to use it the way that someone who needs to use it uses it.
Yes.
And having seen, I've done some accessibility testing. Having watched a blind person using a screen reader and the way they're configuring it, and
yes,
the way they're using it, I just never would have done. So, is there actually do you think there's any value in me doing some screen readers, or forget it and just hand it over to real testing? Ideally,
the latter, to be honest, because it can be totally counterproductive. For example, are the results you're getting from your particular scientific inquiry a result of your own inability to fly the plane as such, or is it because there's something inherently inaccessible in the website? And that's, you see, accessibility is actually quite nuanced, and it's only when you really look under the hood and you can tear things apart you can realize, well, this isn't working for that reason, and like that. So you can get a lot of false positives and all that kind of stuff. But having said that, though, it's not insurmountable that you will effectively learn how to look for some basic stuff, right? So it's not unreasonable to suggest that given some time and sincere effort on your part and lots of coffee, that you may come to terms with the whole thing, but you'll never emulate the real user experience for somebody, because they're so different as well. Like, I know screen reader users who are total power users. I mean, but they're nerds. They've done PhDs, you know, and they're just really total nerds, and they can really fly around. And I know other people who sit down and they tab through the thing. You know, sometime with a girl, I was really shocked. Like, she loaded the page, and the screen reader tells you this page has 15 headings and 75 links, and she goes, "I'm going to start looking at this page." And she started tabbing, tink, 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 and this went on like this, tink, announcing whatever it was, 75 links later, whatever, tink. And then she said, "Yeah, that was okay. I want to go to this page." And she opened another page, and then went, "Oh, I better read it again." Tink. So about an hour later, apart from being fit to kill myself, I was, realized that not everyone is on that uber super nerd level at all, and there's different levels of use. So if you do want to put in the time and effort, it's worthwhile. But you have to be prepared to put in the time and effort. I've been working with blind and vision impaired people now for 7 years. It took me about 3 years to understand how screen readers worked. And that was pretty much day in, day out, being around screen reader users. You know, they're really complicated things. Like, they're not, you know, it's not an intuitive experience. A voiceover is a little bit better because it's, Apple make nice stuff. I'm not an Apple fanboy. I'm kind of going off them a little bit, actually. But they do make stuff that really kind of works. And so when you look at how they did the user experience with voiceover, it's pretty amazing. Actually, voiceover is a superb screen reader. There, I said it. I came out of the cupboard. But it is a superb screen reader. JAWS is the other common one. I didn't include it here because it was all open source, and I thought you'd all be like right on and stuff. But JAWS is the main screen reader, but it's an expensive piece of software. It's about €800, between 800 to €1,000 to buy. Do you know? And so, like, even when you build all these shiny stuff, like HTML5 is going to be, I don't know what's going to happen with that, because there's going to be all these new elements that are going to hit on stream, but they won't be usable by older assistive technology at all. You know, they'll just be parsed as string. They'll have no strings. They don't trigger any function in older assistive technology. This kind of stuff. Anyway, that's not to say that we shouldn't make progress as humanity and all that. So. Now, accessibility now and tomorrow. Follow best practice, web standards, what we loosely call web standards. Years ago, we had the Web Standards Project. It was very cool to be involved in this kind of stuff at one stage. We're probably all dinosaurs now, but I don't know. Look away ARIA, fantastic piece of technology, bridging technology between semantically limited declarative markup languages and the new stuff. So ARIA is really where it's at, I think, even more so than HTML5. For now. Start using HTML5 when and as needed. And there's lots of clever things you can do in HTML5, such as use CSS media queries to actually, query a browser to say, is this browser able to support this particular function? If so, deliver content to that browser. So that could be video, using the new video and audio APIs, which will play video and audio content natively within your browser, which is great. No more Flash, thank God. You can do things like that. You can also create what's technically called polyglot documents. A polyglot document is a document that's partially, say, XML, partially XHTML, and HTML5. And then, you could probably use older versions of HTML if you needed, and then in some parts, and then newer versions in another. HTML5 is not an accessibility silver bullet. A friend of mine said it to me a while ago. I don't know why you're doing this accessibility thing. HTML5 is going to fix everything. I could see where he was coming from in a way, but it's a bit reality versus advertising. It's the McDonald's Big Mac you see when you go into the joint. I don't, but you know what I mean. You see it up there, and then you get the thing. And you're like, sweet Jesus, HTML5 is a bit like that. From an accessibility perspective, I'm in the HTML5 accessibility task force and a part of the working group, and it's been a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. That's all I can say. In terms of trying to make the case for accessibility in that domain. But we have made some progress, but not as much as you'd like after 3 or 4 years. Anyway, use common sense as a guide. Get involved in the community. It's really important. Everyone who's in this room has some interest in this stuff, so do get involved. Your opinions, your perspective, your experience all counts and is really important. Everyone has a tendency to think that it's somebody out there who's the great, clever person who's going to fix all this stuff. No. If you see something wrong, you're probably right. It is wrong, so say something about it. Use a WYSIWYG that supports accessibility, create accessible offline documents, structure your PDFs. Like the stuff that's good for the web is also good for offline documents, so all the best practice in terms of creating structured HTML content, you do the same thing for PDFs, you do the same thing for Word documents. It's exactly the same, and they can all be used by people using screen readers. For example, you know this thing in Word, you've got styles on the, everyone sees this, styles, and you've got this heading 1, heading 2. It should be styles and structure, because that actually applies a semantic to your web content, to your document. So by doing that, you will actually create a document that can be used by a blind user using a screen reader. Okay. I mentioned ARIA a bit earlier. I've talked a little bit about this, so I'll probably just fly on, really. Suffice to say, it's used to supply semantics to Web 2.0, whatever that means, type widgets. Way ARIA is now a part of HTML5, so it's actually been absorbed in the HTML5 spec. It's well worth exploring. So HTML5 and accessibility, HTML5 is a whole load of new semantics, absolutely tons of new stuff. Div type elements that you would use in your pages, you can now use elements like header, footer, nav. There's no content element though, which I thought was a bit bizarre, like, you know.
Isn't there an article element?
There is, yes.
There's an aside as well.
There's an aside, yes, which always reminds me of Charles, the cucumber sandwiches are marvellous. Now that you mention cucumber sandwiches, you know, like that. But yes, there is an aside element, and there's an article element. I'm not even drunk, Christ. There is an article element, and yes, it can be used, but not entirely in the way one would think, because article actually also is a granular thing, right? When you think of an article, it's like there's a big article in the Irish Times today about blah blah, the EU's falling apart or whatever, blah blah. But article can also be something very, very small. It's an article, it's very tiny. So that's also the use for that in terms of its semantics. But yes, so all of those things are kind of there now as native semantics within HTML5. Are they supported by assistive technology? Not in your life. When will they be? I don't know. That's the short answer. So also as a part of HTML5, there's new APIs, application programming interfaces for client-side processing. So basically an API is like a chunk of stuff and a chunk of rules for how to do stuff with the particular thing. So there's a whole load of new things like that within the actual language. Client-side processing, I mean, for example, there's the web workers and web storage APIs, which means that you can now cache stuff on the client side and do processing with that, and it can be used for more sophisticated error messaging and more sophisticated form validation and that kind of stuff, and other things. There are also big challenges for accessibility, such as the canvas element. The canvas is a 2D drawing API, which is basically like paints pixels on the screen. And it's an accessibility nightmare because there's no DOM, there's no accessibility stuff at all, and it's going to be used for loads of stuff. So, yeah. Though the spec says, though the weasel spec says, where there's a semantic alternative for the use of the Canvas 2D drawing API, that should be used instead. Yeah, as if anyone's going to pay any attention. Like, it's a really cool kind of drawing thing. Everyone's going to use it for drawing everything, but this, yeah, anyway. Much best practice from HTML4. Yes, anything, the stuff that was good for accessibility that you knew about yesterday is going to be good tomorrow and today. Not great assistive technology support yet, which is yep, the way it is. So I'm winding up now. So here's some stats of basic accessibility browser support. The friend Steve Faulkner did this, and this is a bit old now, actually.
Not sure. Well, I think Chrome has been higher now.
Yeah, I think he focused on kind of accessibility related elements, but actually even in the research that he did, it was a little bit, they're not entirely just accessibility related stuff, but Firefox was kind of doing pretty good. IE is not bad from an accessibility perspective. IE9 is pretty good. It does implement a lot of these things.
On browsers,
yes,
we work with clients who, high on their specification and really accessibility, compliance to all the standards and everything.
yes,
And then you find out they actually have as their default organisation browser IE6.
oh yes,
And unlikely to upgrade it
yes.
because it's an IT standard set by government.
You're very, very clever people.
So you talk to them about accessibility and looking at your chart here, IE looks like it's way up there.
Yeah, that's IE9.
Exactly, which they're not likely to have for another 5 years.
No, that's being generous, yeah.
So you end up developing a site for them,
Yes,
which has to be compliant with their browser because they have to edit it.
that's because they live in fear.
Absolutely. And then they complain.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
level of accessibility that they are expecting is suddenly compromised because of the code
Yeah.
specification we've been able to use to deliver something that is supposed to look like you designed originally.
Yeah. Totally. Well, look, if I could be of any use to you, right, one of the things that I've learned is you, not that I would have had a past life in law or something, but you learn how to make a good case for something that's fairly watertight, that's not apparent. Because accessibility is quite nuanced, Now, the decision to use a particular technology is a departmental or organizational decision, right, based on what they thought was the best thing, based on the best information they had at any given point in time, right? So fair enough. It's only years later, when the alcohol wears off, you find out that there's a dog lying beside you kind of thing, right? So, this is all apropos of you have to make the case for change. And when you're involved in accessibility and fighting for it, because it is a fight, you're often the lone voice in the wilderness, like, John in a sackcloth or something, wandering around. It's a bit like that. In fact, I might get a sackcloth, that would be a good one. But it's a bit like that. It's a struggle, a total uphill struggle a lot of the time. People don't care. It's a niche issue. Well, let them sue us and then we'll do something about it. You come across that, or there's just resistance to change. But when you can actually say, this is actually actively damaging to somebody as such, and in a clear and concise way, without being emotive, then,
These are health service providers with thousands
Yeah.
Doing exactly the
of
same.
installed base.
Yeah, I know.
The people you're dealing with are the communications team, who are the lowest in the food chain on the IT list of priorities, because it's much more important to share patient records with a national IT system than worry about whether or not browsers are.
Well, that's exactly the problem. We just wish IE would just go away and die. It would make everyone's life
So did Microsoft.
a lot easier.
To be fair to them, they want IE6 to go away and die.
I think so, yeah.
On the website, IE6 countdown.
Yeah.
Can I just put a little bit of defensive on behalf
Yeah.
of the NHS in that
No.
It's not working on the blooming site.
well, in fairness, the direction from on IE is nobody should be using IE6.
Yes.
Everyone should migrate. However, again, this goes back to it's not just IE6.
It's Windows 2000
It's
that's underneath it.
well XP now, and we've only just transferred ourselves to IE7.
Yeah.
Actually broke a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
We have big contracts with big databases, and when those contracts were signed, they're all signed under IE6.
Yes.
Is the only browser we will support.
Yes.
So, I know it's absolutely irritating to us, but normally they are allowed to install other browsers as well. And our biggest bugbear with IE is we can't do multiple versions.
Oh yeah, it's very. You need to install a virtual VM machine to just do test on another browser, which is terrible. But you can use multiple IE though, but that's another.
Which is
thing.
still a bit.
Still not great, particularly
Install Firefox.
Well, basically,
Yes.
Changing the subject ever so slightly.
Yes.
Testing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did a huge site for a big national charity. We built it to my best ability.
Absolutely.
AA standards,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
They were really. I sold them on the idea of building an accessible website. Right. They took it really on board. When they finished, when the site was finished, they said, okay, great. When can we go to get it certified? Is there a badge we
Yes.
We found that the RNIB
Yes.
in the UK counterpart.
Yes.
And an organisation in Wales, if I remember right, I forget their name. They both were offering testing, but it was going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds.
We offer testing, it's also thousands and thousands of pounds.
Is that just, RNIB for a dynamic website as well?
Yeah.
The RNIB will say, look, I'll test it today because I'm going to test every single page.
Yes.
But of course tomorrow it's different, so you can't have a badge on your site to say I've tested it because it's no longer accurate. Is there any?
No.
Yeah. And then there's some in the States and they're the same.
Yeah, there's no, all of these things are self-declarations of conformance. If you're going to claim any kind of conformance with WCAG 2.0, it's a self-declaration of conformance. Now, I can understand why an organisation wants it. We get that. We want you to certify our website. We won't do that.
Right.
And we'll say to a client before you do this, we'll help you improve the user experience. We'll help you make an accessible website that can be used by more people. It'll improve your search engine optimization rankings, all of that good stuff. And if you're interested in that, we'll work with you. And that's really it. Yeah, I'm getting the thing. I'm going to have to go.
Use your services and the other ones that I mentioned.
Use them.
As part of your site building process?
Yes.
Not the site validation process?
Yeah, exactly, because such a thing I don't think really exists yet. There's just, we can trust somebody when they say we have reached some level of compliance, and actually what you're best off doing is in your declarations of conformance, or in the States they've got VPATs, what you do is you actually state where it's not.
Okay.
And then be clear about that and let people do things. Listen, I'm available for chats if anyone wants to chat. I'm going to have to just hang up my hat here. Thanks very much. Okay.